75% of Americans have heard nonstop cable news chatter about the Biden White House sending cluster munitions to Ukraine. So I'll save your sanity and just discuss the significance of the event. Of course, if you don't know what a cluster munition is by now, plus the acceptable dud rate, with acceptable in air quotes, then just go to the website any major news network and you'll find out more than you ever wanted to know. This announcement regarding cluster bombs lines up with my June 19th broadcast where I discussed the virtually medieval tactics Russia and Iran are deploying to stall Ukraine's much anticipated counteroffensive. I'm going to use the phrase reverse blitzkrieg to describe Moscow's tactics now. The Russians have stubbornly refused to fight the modern war the West knows Kiev can win. We believe that Javelin and Patriot missiles rule the battlefield and can end the war. Period. End of story. And that's absolutely true. But veterans of the Cold War remember the flood of Soviet armor that was supposed to sweep over the North German plain. While the conventional forces in Europe treaty put those tanks in hundreds of junkyards across Russia, well, even if you don't buff the rust out, that old PT-76 will still absorb one, and maybe two, Javelin missiles. Moscow is betting they can eat at least 10 Javelins a day, which is the official rate the missile plant in Alabama is churning them out at. Likewise, the Iranian suicide drones are built at a plant in Russia to force their opponents to waste Patriot missiles on remote-controlled airplanes. If you haven't read Barbara Tuchman's Guns of August, then follow President Kennedy's advice and read it. He actually sent a copy to the captain of every ship in the blockade around Cuba. Tuchman delved into the shortcomings of the Russian high command during World War I, including talking uncoded over open radio channels, but also described the Russian steamroller that Western Europe put its hope in. The Tuchman's well-written narrative makes it clear that France was saved by the sacrifice of the Russian people and monarchy, and this is why President Biden braved the political backlash of his own party to send cluster bombs to Kiev. The far left around the globe opposed the use of cluster bombs anywhere and placed them on the level of chemical or biological weapons. So there are the supporters of the White House who will feel deeply conflicted by this decision. Of course, this decision underlines what I discussed about Iranian involvement in Ukraine during my first broadcast. 40 years ago, Iran was a nation isolated from the world and running short on spare parts when it faced an Iraqi army that had Western arms manufacturers tripping over each other to sell Saddam Hussein the most modern weapons. Iran has been here before. And it is this reverse blitzkrieg that is a combination experience from the horrors of the Eastern Fronts both in 1943 and 1983. The announcement of cluster bombs going to Kiev shows that the Biden White House is following the same Bismarck-like realpolitik policies Brussels did when the EU committed to sending Ukraine 3,155 millimeter artillery shells a day. That's about 1 million a year. Whatever one's personal beliefs about Russia, cluster bombs, or even the Biden White House, this decision is good news because right now Russia is, more than ever, an enemy to Western democracies. Tomorrow, Moscow may not be our enemy. But for today, this strategy if it is pursued, will win the war, but outbleeding the Russian juggernaut. And at the moment, that is the only strategy Kiev can count on.
Oh, say, can you see by the dawn's early light what so proudly we hailed at the twilight last gleaming? Whose stripes and bright stars through the perilous fight o'er the ramparts we watched were so gallantly streaming, and the rocket-red glare the bombs bursting in air gave proof through the night that our flag was still there. Oh, say does that star-spangled banner yet wave o'er the land of the free and the home of the brave? On the shore dimly seen through the mist of the deep, where the foes of the host in dread silence reposes. What is that which the breeze o'er the towering steep, as it fitfully blows, half concealed, half discloses? Now it catches